Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, also known as 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today we have with us Wyn Morgan. Wyn is a Three Principles practitioner based in Windsor, UK, and works with corporations and private individuals in every continent around the world. Having stumbled across the principles 8 years ago, he has completely changed his relationship to his own life and with himself. Having been in the people development world for the past 20 years within organizations and as a coach consultant with his own business for the past 12 years, he now spends half of his time working away from the UK, and today happens to be in Venice, California. He's studied with Michael Neill and been mentored by George and Linda Pransky and Barb Patterson. Wyn is currently on the faculty of Super Coach 2018 and 19, and recently returned from a month working with his own mentor, George Pransky, to deepen his grounding even more. Wyn is a patriotic Welshman, and given how much he travels, is thankful to still feel like a big kid when he gets on the plane. Love that. So, Wyn, thank you so much for joining us once again. I am really looking forward to hearing how to make sense of life, which is your topic. So
yeah, me too. That'll be fun. I'm wondering how it's going to come out. So I love this program for the 3PGC because it's such a wonderful resource for people to gain access free and at any time of some of the best teachers in the world. And I go into this quite a lot. I remember, funnily enough, in an airport lounge a few months ago, listening to one of Barb's latest. And I also remember being on a delayed flight listening to Michael Neill, the one that he did last year, and my friend John Al-Mokadem as well. Listened to that recently, and it's just always such a lovely thing to be involved in. And also looking at some of these amazingly friendly faces that I know from around the world right now on this webinar. A lot of us have been around this understanding and working this understanding for some time, and some less so. And whether you're watching this on recording, I'd like to just share some of the things that I'm seeing more recently that helps me see more about making sense of life. Now, the reason that came to me as an idea of what to call today's talk is that for most of my time since I was born, none of life really made any sense to me. It looked really complex. It looked challenging. It looked like I was a victim. It looked like I was being beaten up by it. And consequently, of course, if I thought I was being beaten up by life wasn't a whole lot of fun. It really wasn't. And I can laugh about it now, of course. But it wasn't fun. And what's interesting to notice is that from the outside, I don't think my life is vastly different than it would have been 15 years ago. So in my mid-30s, I was doing an awful lot of international traveling with corporations and helping them solve their business issues and upskilling their people and getting their people to become more effective. Going everywhere around the world with that, a very privileged and honored place. But for the most of my time doing that, I just didn't feel happy at all. It looked like a really great life from the outside, but it kind of sucked inside. And that's been like that. Well, it had been like that since I could remember, really. So that's a bit of background on me. And then, as Bonnie just said, I stumbled across this by accident via Michael Neill in 2010. A half-day session with him here in Los Angeles. And I didn't like what he said. I thought it was terrible. I was looking to be fixed. I was looking for it to be, NLP'd, because that's what he was into when I first met him in the middle of the last decade, in around 2005, 6, 7. But he was talking about something different. And I must have heard something, even though I didn't like it and I was battling with a lot of noise in my head in that half-a-day session with him. Because when I left, I said, I'll be back. I'll be back, I said. And if you do Super Coach in 2012, which was 13 months after this conversation I was having at his home, I'll be there. Well, lo and behold, something must have shifted, invisible to me, during the following year of 2011. And I was in, by August, I was all signed up for the Super Coach in 2012. Paid up everything and booked my flights, I think, by the end of that August in 2011, which was then a 6-month, 1 weekend a month program. And in that time, in that 6 months, which I really didn't understand most of the stuff people were talking about, but that's when I first met Aaron Turner, Mara Gleason, spent quality time with Michael Neill over that 6 weekends, and George Pransky and Linda Pransky. But none of it really made sense to me then as they were talking, and Michael was talking too. It just seemed an interesting idea that was great for somebody else, but not for me, which is how a lot of my life looked. Life great for other people, but not for me. Well, now I know why that looked true to me, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. But what I will say is that now I'm in the privileged position to work on Super Coach in 2017, 18, and again moving to the next episode of it in Super Coach Europe in 2018 and 19. My life is almost like the before 2012 and after 2012. It's that much of a delineation of how much at home I feel as a human being and my place in the world, whatever that actually means. And really what's changed is my relationship with what I think. That's what's really changed. Is that previously everything I thought looked really true, looked really permanent, looked really serious, and looked really personal. Well, now most of my thinking looks really true, really permanent, really personal, and really compelling. But I know a little bit now to know that's how thought works. And just because it looks really compelling and personal and permanent to me, doesn't mean it's true. It just means that that's how thought looks to the person thinking it. So all of a sudden, all of that noise in my head, and most of that directed back at myself, it all kind of starts making sense that that's just my story. And even when it grips me, it's still just a very compelling story. And I love just sharing that. And what really made that clear for me was, I think it was a few months ago, maybe 2 months ago now, and I was listening to a recording of a coach who's also a client, and she was coaching her client, and I was listening to the recording. And the coach doing a great job in listening really well to what her client was saying. But really what the client was up against was the fact that a lot of the time, what we think about us and what we think about life looks really compelling and true to us. And it was just a very vivid story that this lady had about her life. And a beautiful job in the last 20 minutes of that call for the coach, who's my client, for that coach to actually unpack that and point to the nature of thought, that the nature of thought is that it is fleeting, it changes. Sometimes it looks more real than at other times. And taking those two facts into combination means that, so it's fleeting even though it doesn't look it. It's not true even though it looks it sometimes. And the client got beautifully reflective and suspicious about her story of what she was up to and in life. And the ending of the call was just gorgeous for me to listen to. That the coach did such an amazing job in helping the client get reflective. So I'm listening to this call as I'm driving home, nice and safely, just in case there's anybody from the law or the police actually listening in, driving very safely with the sound on via Bluetooth. And then when I got home, about an hour after I got home, I had my session with that coach, with my client. And it was just striking to me is that when I was talking to my client, She had a really compelling story about what she was up to in the world, and she had presented the exact same symptoms as her own client did to her. And I found that a little bit ironic, a little bit being an understatement. And then I just kind of got a little puzzled that clearly the person I was talking to directly didn't recall the fact that her conversation with her client was identical to the one that she was having with me. So I brought that up. Now, she couldn't remember that. And I'm not surprised, because when we're thick in it, when we've got a lot of really fast, personal, heavy thinking going on that looks compelling, it's difficult to think about the good stuff. It's difficult to have clear memory, a clear mind. It's going to disappear all the time. Well, that's almost like a law of physics to me, that's how that works for us human beings. Every one of us does that. But in talking to my client, the coach, it was amazing for her to notice. And I said, well, listen, you sent me the recording, so you're going to have the recording. But everything you've said, your client said to you, and you answered that beautifully. She said, well, what did I say? Well, I'm going to paraphrase exactly what you said to your client, which was, yeah, thought looks really real to us when we think it. And when our level of consciousness, when our mood is low, it looks personal, it looks true, and all of those kind of things. It really is sticky. And she went, so this is just temporary like hers. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with me to think this. No. Okay. And even though I talk about this with my clients, and I've been learning about this for over a year now, it's okay for me to do this. Oh, yeah. And she relaxed. Visibly saw her on the screen relax on our call. Because we just tend to forget that it's fine for other people. We can see through their story. We can see through their insecurity. We can see most of that as complete nonsense. But when it comes to us with our own story of insecurity and anything else that comes into our mind, it doesn't look nonsense. It's a nice thing to remember. And for me, that's really stuck with me over the last few months, given how many times, of course, because I'm human, I'm going to fall into that frequently too. Thankfully, less and less, but I don't even care about that so much anymore. It's a nice thing to remember that this is a part of being human. We don't transcend it. We understand it more. And when we can, slip into a quieter mind, we remember that. We wake up to that. But the nature of human beings is that we have sometimes a quiet mind, sometimes a noisy one. Sometimes things look personal, sometimes things look hard. A lot of the time they look completely philosophical, that, well, that's how life is, that's how we are as human beings. And then everything goes simple again. So I wanted to start off with that. That's all I wanted to start off with. So I'm going to just click on the chat button here and see if there are any questions. Okay, some questions about technical things, so I think that's going to be fine. Okay, cool. Now, having watched a lot of these webinars, I know a lot of the time people get a little shy when the first thing that comes up is asking questions. But I want you to know that you can ask anytime. And as Bonnie said earlier on, you can either kind of like wave like this, or you can just, I think you can just ask a question into the chat box here. Yeah, Lisa, it's eye-opening to know that we are human and it's all right to get caught up. I don't think there's really a way of avoiding it, but also to find that it can be really amusing when we see that that's all that's going on. I laugh at myself an awful lot more than I used to. And I mean a really deep, meaningful laugh, as opposed to a laugh to try to make myself feel better. It's not a make myself feel better laugh, which is what I might have done 15 years ago. Now it's a proper laugh at just seeing the absurdity of what it is to fall into the trap of being human and thinking that we could be something else. And what I love about this understanding of mind, thought, and consciousness in whatever language we choose to use, and whatever we choose to see, I love the fact that it makes sense of everything, makes sense of every emotion, makes sense of why, I don't know, half an hour before this webinar started, that I noticed that I'd cut myself shaving this morning. I was wondering, what will people think? And then, of course, within a moment, I'd laugh at that too, because, you know, who cares? But it was just interesting to notice how many things just kind of fall away and how much more simple life looks. Doesn't make it easy, by the way. Simple isn't the same as easy, but it's nice to know how simple it looks. Because there are some things, you know, heartbreak and loss and grief are hard. Feeling down can be hard. But it's also simple. It's really simple, because the only thing that's really going on is that we're having a very human experience. And I don't know I'd want to feel anything other than sad if I'm grieving for somebody. It's kind of natural. So there's an awful lot less fighting going on for me personally than there used to be about how I feel. And that took a weight off my mind, a weight off my life, when I figured out I didn't have to fix what I felt. I didn't have to fix what I thought either. Because what a lot of people, and when I'm saying a lot of people, this is me included to a huge extent, when I first came across this, I thought that, well, if I'm feeling what I'm thinking in the moment, and it's my relationship with my thinking that's really getting me sticky and really taking all my feelings seriously, then all I need to do is change my mind, change what's in my head, change what I think. Well, of course, that doesn't work. I'm saying, of course, that doesn't work. It looks like, of course, to me now, but we still kind of sometimes fall into that trap. And the most recent example of a conversation I had with an Uber driver late Saturday night, bringing me back from my friend's house in Malibu here in Los Angeles, back to Venice. An Egyptian driver, who'd been driving Uber for about 3 weeks, has been living over here from Egypt and California for the last 2 years. And in the 35-minute journey from my friend's house back to where I'm staying, it was effectively a coaching session on this understanding of how we operate as human beings. And what struck me in that conversation, and certainly in the first 15 minutes of it, is how hard he was trying to get a better life. That he'd been listening to all the spiritual teachers, lots of really famous names, and he was trying really hard to fix life from the outside in order for him to feel better on the inside. Now, I poked around in that for a little, and he said, yeah, I know what you're saying. So I know that if I get a better job, a better car, it isn't going to make me happy. Because I've got a beautiful wife and beautiful kids, and I'm living in a beautiful home, but I'm unhappy now. And I know I don't have to look far into the news to realize that stuff doesn't make anybody happy. And the lack of stuff doesn't make anybody unhappy. So then he said to me, well, what do I need to do then to get a happier life? Because I'm trying really hard. Well, that sentence finished it off. We try really hard to have a good life. It's only going to go one way. Another way of saying it as to what he was up against is that if it's true that we're feeling our thinking in the moment, and if we're feeling low, then our thinking's a little bit off. It's not great thinking. then more thinking, when the thinking isn't working, isn't going to solve a thing. It's going to make it worse. So we're trying to fix the problem with the thing that caused the problem. Logically, that makes no sense whatsoever. And it was funny as I was, driving, well, as he was driving back down in the last few miles, that, he started welling up. You could see a tear from this side as I was looking at him. And he could just see the possibility that the only thing up with him was the fact that he was trying hard, and that when he slipped into a quieter mind, he woke up to that life was great right now. The only thing that was up is that he thought it wasn't. And a lot of the time it doesn't look like it is, but we don't need to do anything with that, because it'll naturally fall back into a wonderful state of feeling great. And even when we don't, we know that that's just the illusion of being human for however many years we've got in this experience. It's a nice thing to fall back into. That even feeling sad, lonely, insecure, they're facets of the human condition. Doesn't mean anything else. And there's nothing to fix, because it fixes itself. There's so many analogies around that, such as fixing the weather when it doesn't need fixing. And the harder we try and control things like weather, the worse it actually feels. Try and make a rainy day go away. Well, the rainy day feels like it lasts longer because we're trying to fix it. Well, rain goes away. And the great thing that's different from the weather, what's different from the weather for us as human beings, is that left to its own devices, it does fine. It does the nature of mind is that it quietens when we're not playing in it, when we're just letting it do its thing. So what I'm noticing for me is that I'm spending an awful lot less of my life looking in here, which means I'm far more observant out there. So I see more beauty, more joy, more opportunities, more abundance with every passing year. And I love that. And for a guy for the first 42 years of his life to think that life was nothing close to a blessing, for me to say that publicly like this it's a heck of a gift. Heck of a gift. And the only real key insight is, and it's the same insight deeper and deeper and deeper again, is just to see how we are as humans, what our own internal operating system is, which is, my thinking looks real to me. And sometimes it really looks real and sometimes it doesn't. My mood goes up and down. I used to think that was a problem, but now I just know that's nothing other than ebb and flow of a tide on a beach. And the beach doesn't take it seriously when the tide goes out. It doesn't take it personally. It's just how tides work. It's how beaches are. Well, that's me in moods now. And for somebody who was on mood stabilizers and antidepressants, where are we now, 2018, 13 years ago, for me to see the complete humanity as opposed to anything wrong with me for having a mood that wasn't stable, I find that a wonderful relief. Wonderful relief. Now, there's one more thing I want to say before I really do open it up to you for your questions, is that it looks like sometimes this can be woo-woo, or it looks like it's overly spiritual. It looks like it's some mumbo jumbo at times, but it's completely practical. And while it is spiritual, it's also logical. Because we all know this deep down, like my Uber driver on Saturday night into Sunday morning. We all know this, really. And then it's seeing it more deeper and more deeper and deeper and getting that relief. But it also has amazing practical implications. Because the less I'm spending my energy and my focus of my thinking towards me, well, I'm, as I said a few minutes ago, spending more of my time out there, which makes me far more present in business meetings, far more present with my coaching clients, far more present to identify what a corporation is up against and what they're up to when I'm doing corporate work. It makes complete sense of when I'm training people to become better trainers and better presenters, public speakers. Well, this makes sense of all of that. It makes sense of why does someone get insecure when they're looking to sell or to market something. It makes complete sense to that. And it also makes when we see the sense in it, it makes the problem disappear. Or it makes it no longer seem like a problem. And just in this last kind of 3 or 4 months, the number of times when I've been sharing this with organizations, and then I typically do a 30-day and a 60-day review where we get online and then do a review call with them. I'm just constantly not surprised, but constantly delighted with how many definite, tangible business results organizations get by their people waking up to this. So as an example, there's one CEO of a client that I work with here in the US, and he's based in the Midwest of the US. And him and a number of colleagues in different parts of the operating company got together for a few days in March with me. And in our review session with the CEO, he said, you know, what's really stuck with me from those 2 days is that my presence will always be better than my preparation. Because I used to really, this is what you were saying, I used to prepare a lot for my meetings with my clients. And these are clients that would spend somewhere in the region of $200 million a year with my client, with this guy who's the CEO of a marketing services company. And he said, that stuck with me, that my presence is far better, more effective than my preparation. And it's also noticeable that when I'm talking to my counterparts in my client base, how much more I'm learning about them, their hidden agendas. We're working far more collaboratively together. I know that their loyalty to me and to us as an organization is far higher now, even after a couple of interactions like this, because they're experiencing me completely differently and they're commenting on it. Well, it didn't take long. I think it was in 40 days that this company put an extra, I'm trying to remember now, something like 4 million on their bottom line, 4 million US. And that's not an unknown number, right? That's something that happens frequently. And as I said, I'm constantly delighted, but no longer surprised by that. Because this makes sense of what works between human beings, in us as a human being in our own life and relationship to life, but also in every walk of our life, whether it's with our families, with friends, at work. It's everywhere because it's where we come from and what we see. So it's going to have an impact everywhere in really wonderfully practical ways. Okay. So I guess we're just about halfway through, Bonnie. So I am now going to look at the chat box again and see if there are any questions. But if you do have questions, you can not be shy. You can actually put yourself visible on the screen and give a wave because I can see you. There's some lovely comments here if you can look into the chat box from Lisa Lincoln. So Lisa, thanks for sharing that. I think there's a way of also raising a digital hand. Is that true, Bonnie? There's a way you can actually just put your hand up.
Yes, if you open the participant box, on the bottom of that is a hand. You can click raise my hand, or you can unmute yourself. Wyn, there's something that you said that is really sticking with me. I love this. I'm sure I'm not gonna say it the way that you did, but it was something like your client learned that his presence was much more effective than his preparation. I like that. That's so true. I find that true, yeah.
It is. And I can't remember saying that, but I know it's true. But he remembered it. Well, that takes 3 seconds out of 2 days of whatever we talked about. So at least that 3 seconds was really useful for him anyway. But literally not only useful, I know that's changed everything about the way that he sees his work. And I know he's talking about with his clients too. To that point, and I will come on because I think Laura's just mentioned something in the chat box here. To that point as well, one concept that's been going around a lot in certain business areas in the last kind of decade or so is something called the trusted advisor. And a gentleman by the name of David H. Meister, wrote a book back in, I think, the turn of the century, maybe 2002. And in this, he identified through lots of research factors that what makes somebody trust another person. And out of the 4 factors, some of them are really great traps. So it's reliability. So how reliable we are over time. Credibility, how credible we are. And intimacy and business intimacy here is how comfortable somebody is in telling us stuff, right? Their hidden agendas. And then the 4th factor, the most important, is something called self-orientation. Now, self-orientation is the degree to which I am thinking about me. So self-orientation focus. If I'm focusing on me when I'm talking to a client, then clearly that's not a great place to come from to build trust. And while those 4 ideas kind of make a heap of sense, this understanding is what really brings it to life. This understanding makes sense of, well, if I am thinking about me, what's the antidote? What's the thing I would need to see in order for me to think less of me? Because as soon as I think, well, I think a lot of me, I'm now thinking more of me because I'm now putting another layer of thinking about how I'm doing. Well, this releases all of that, this understanding about how mind, thought, and consciousness work. It really does. So it is the hidden link that very few people, a handful of people around the world, are talking about this to business. And I know, delighted to see a few of them on the screen here. And Steph just asked me a question now, and I'll come to that in a second. So I know there are 2 questions here, I think. One from Laurie. Hi, Laurie. How would you explain addiction, abuse, and all of the really difficult aspects of life that many of us deal with if our thinking naturally fixes itself? See, this is a great question. And all I'll say to this is that right now, let's see what I see. I'm going to come at this with fresh as opposed to any kind of preparation of what I might have said yesterday to someone with this. Well, any kind of form of addiction is a way of soothing and our best way of coping with how we're feeling. Now, I know, quite a few people who have had drug and alcohol issues, clients too, self-harming, eating disorders. All of those kind of things are in the same realm, as you say here. And regarding addiction, it's each person doing the best they can in the moment, to cope with life. Not always easy to see. But in watching people go through that, I know that's true. In that moment, they're doing the best that they can to cope. Now, on other occasions, the same person might have thoughts of taking a hit. I mean, you know, whatever their addiction is. And they don't do it. That's interesting. So that's something that I often talk about. If there is a difference, that they see that even having the thought of doing their self-soothing drug of choice, which by the way could be shopping, could be gambling, could be anything, could be drugs, could be alcohol. Any of that is what makes sense to them in the moment. And they don't always do it every time they think of it. But to me, it makes complete sense. Yeah, and Lisa says anything outside of us, you're right, because really what happens there is, with any form of addiction, is the fact that we think that when we do things out there, it's going to make us feel better inside. Now, they're not different from anybody with that, because we all think that. We all think that from time to time, and then they're no different. It's just that they've got a habit, which is that habit of what to do to soothe and calm themselves and cope with life the best that they can. But what's possible for them to see is that when they see the inside out nature of life, that life doesn't come this way to us. It's this way. It's this way that we experience life. Then it's possible for them to see something different, and the relationship with whatever they are addicted to can change from there. But the one thing that's good to know is that if I think, and I've got a client presenting a problem to me of, let's say, self-harming or drug abuse, if I see that there's something wrong with them as a human being, I know I can't help. I'm not useful to them. Because there's nothing really wrong with them. They're just under a misunderstanding of how life works. Now, when it comes to abuse, your second point here, Laurie, is that I'm not excusing the behavior, okay? One thing to know. But the cause of any behavior comes from our relationship with what we think. So as an example, I know this might sound like a silly example, but it's the one that comes to mind. I remember being really angry in my late teens at my father, because I was really angry at anybody in a heartbeat then. And I went upstairs into my room. I must have been about 18. And I punched the wall. And, well, you know, a wall's harder than bone. Well, that wall was. So, well, it really hurt. It hurt me. But I also kind of noticed that that makes no sense. Because the wall had nothing to do with how I felt. My father had nothing to do with how I felt. Whatever was inside of me that made me frustrated wasn't coming from out there. So anybody that wakes up to the fact that, well, it's what's going on in here and here, that's the cause of my anger and frustration, taking it out on anything outside of me makes no sense whatsoever, because that isn't the cause. A lot of the times when people are abusive, it's their own insecurity raising its head. And when people wake up to their insecurity and the nature of that, and to see that for what it actually is, a story that looks like it's true, that I will write a story about my insecurity, it looks like she, him, it is causing my bad feeling, then I'm liable to go out there and thrash out. Because I think that would solve it. But when I see that the problem's internal, and I'm innocent to it, I'm innocent to my internal state of mind and my relationship with my thinking, I don't control that at all. Well, all of a sudden, if I see the fact that the thought to the thinker looks sometimes really, really real and compelling, but when I get suspicious to that and suspicious that they out there aren't causing my inner feeling, I'm less likely to go out there to take action. And when I'm less likely to go out there to take action, what can really happen is then I might get a little bit more reflective of me as a human being. And when I'm not trying to fix how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking, if I see that as something that fixes itself, I'm going to calm down. It's amazing, anybody who's angry and lashed out, at some point they all calm down every time. So when I think it says there at the end of your question, when deal with if our thinking naturally fixes itself. Yeah, I might have said that incorrectly if that's what you got from it, because thinking doesn't need to be fixed. Nothing about it needs to be fixed. It's the human condition. But what is up for grabs is what we make of that, what we make of our thinking, what we make of being in a mood, what we make of the fact that my anger looks like it's being caused by someone outside of me when I know that's not how life works. So it's my relationship to this that can change. Because believe me, I can get as insecure as I always have, but it just feels to me that it's far more likely now to be a work of fiction as opposed to an autobiography. So I see through it a little bit more. I'm a bit suspicious that when I'm feeling that very familiar feeling of feeling insecure, which I can do really easily, well, I know the only thing up with that is my mind's closed down. There's nothing to fix. Nothing to fix. Not my mood, nor my thinking. So Laurie, I hope that was helpful. And I know that either you can put a message up on here or you can message me again a little later. So the next question comes here from Steph. Hi, Steph, buddy. Could you share how your understanding of the principles has changed your own business over the years? Thank you. My business looks completely different to me. And I don't know if that's really true, because it's just how it looks to me. Because I know next week I'm going to be talking with a group of, I think, 16 people who are in their mid-20s in one client organization about connecting better with their clients. The little booklet they've got was really written by the client. But what they love and why they keep hiring me to do about 6 of these in the UK and probably another 2 of them in Asia, another 2 of them in the US this year is the fact that they get something far more meaningful. A better way of saying the answer to this question, Steph, is that where I'm coming from is completely different than would have been 6 years ago. And whether I'm selling ice cream on a beach, or selling clothes in a clothes store, or groceries in a supermarket, everything's going to look different to me in that place. Now, given the fact I run my own business, of course, and I'm showing up differently, then my business is going to be completely different because I, get to call the shots a bit. When I'm saying a bit, a lot. How it's changed my business is that it looks really simple now. And everything that a corporate client or a private individual comes to me with, if I'm not seeing it simply, I'm not understanding it yet. So I get curious with that to begin with. I need to really get behind the scenes of it, upstream of it, to really understand it more. And then when I do understand it, it's a far easier place to come from then to go in with some solutions of what to really can be helpful for. Certainly I'm talking about the corporate clients there. So as an example, there's one organization I'm talking to now who are having problems with their procurement when they're talking to procurement organizations or professional buyers, because they're being beaten up in negotiations of large multi-million pound, multi-million dollar contracts over the year. And they notice that their own client servicing teams and account management teams get really insecure when they talk to professional buyers, these procurement people. And when I'm identifying exactly that that's the issue, all of a sudden, then I'll talk about the nature of insecurity and the fact that the person in procurement is identical to them as a human being. And the person in procurement just wants to do a good job for themselves in the same way as they, as a client service director, want to do a good job for them and their organizations. So it helps make things really simple. And to my mind, the simpler things look, the easier then it is to implement anything in an organization. And that's everywhere. So I look at my own business, and if it looks like my business is complex, well, I've slipped into some sticky thinking. That's all. And I know I don't have to do anything about that, because it'll, do what it'll do, and I'll see it simple again. I don't know, Steph, if that answers your question. Okay, it was a thumb up and a kind of a head thing like that. Well, it's the best I've got right now. It's the best I've got right now. But I think the other thing to say, just one more point on that. Given how much more fun life is now than it was not that long ago, that's kind of an implication on my business. How much lighter everything looks, how much more fun I'm coming with every day with. Because I know I'm not cursed, because I've seen that the only thing up with me was the fact that I thought my thinking looked real. That was it, right? And also to know that I was born creative, born resilient. It's true for everyone on planet Earth. Every human's like this. There aren't some creative people and some not. We're all incredibly creative. So it means that new ideas, fresh ideas can come where they always come from, wonderfully out of the blue. And I spend less time then caught up under the axle of my own mind and in my own head that make me not hear that. What's also funny to know is that it's become an easier business to run. And the results are improving year by year in an exceptional way. And at some point during the year, I'll fall into that trap of, oh, well, will I beat last year? And sometimes I think, well, I won't. And then at some point, will I do? And I think, well, how did that happen? Because it didn't feel like I worked hard. Steph's nodding at that one, yeah, because I think we can both relate to that. Cool. Thanks for the question, buddy.
Hello.
Espen, you have a question, so you've been unmuted.
Yes, I have unmuted myself. So I have a very good question.
Well, you're building it up. It better be
free
good now.
will. Did you hear what I said?
Well, you had a question about free will. I'm waiting for the question itself now, my friend.
Oh, good idea. So, do you see we have a degree of free will?
Here's what I know. I have no idea.
Great.
And to me, and I don't think I'll ever know, and me analyzing whether I do or I don't doesn't tend to be helpful, so I've given it up. It's one of those questions that's the eternal question. You could say the same thing about fate and destiny. Well, look, we're not going to know until after the event, so I might as well enjoy the event.
Okay, I have another question now that you answered it so briefly. So I was curious about the difference of loving someone and being in love.
Well, what occurs to me is that it's whatever we make up each of those phrases to be, will be our version of reality. Because here's what we try and figure out. We try and figure out meanings to words. When words are meaningless to themselves, words are defined by the meaning we personally put on them. So I wouldn't know what your version of loving somebody and being in love would be. I don't know what that is for me right now. I could offer an opinion, but it would just be an opinion. It wouldn't make it true.
No, I don't want the truth. I want your opinion. You're my guru.
Yeah, slippery slope there, Espen. Gurus, really? Okay. Well, it seems to me is that we make up as a society the difference that when we're in love with somebody, that means we're in a romantic, intimate relationship with them. Or we want to be, or we were, right? It's that kind of way of describing the relationship, or it looks as if I will only be happy when they're with me, and only my happiness depends upon them, is what I think an awful lot of the songs and poems, and probably most of my life, that's how it looks to be in love with somebody. But then there's the unconditional version of that, which may be loving, which may be just loving everybody. So one way of saying it, and again, this is just my opinion, is that I know I'm capable of loving anybody and everybody, even the people whose opinion I don't agree with, and their behavior I don't agree with. Now, I know that's possible. Most of the time, I don't do that. So something as innocent as somebody taking too long in front of me in the security line at an airport, I don't love them then, right? But sometimes I do. Sometimes I find it amusing, and sometimes I find it endearing. But if I'm not in love with them, it means that I've got stuff going on in my head about them. It doesn't mean anything about them. Now, a quick story on this. It was about 1.5 years ago on a Sunday morning in Lacona, Washington. And I was there with other Pransky mentees, and I think 5 of us were sharing a house. And I was standing on the deck really early in the morning with a cup of coffee, because I'd always get up first, often because I had calls back to Europe. So I'd make a big pot of coffee for the entire house, for Angus Raheny, for Jason Berv, and also for Scott Kelly. And that was my kind of penance for waking them all up, because I had calls morning West Coast time, morning Pacific time, kind of lunchtime and afternoon back in Europe. So I'd make the house an entire pot of coffee. Well, this Sunday morning, because it was Sunday, I had no calls to make. So I was able to enjoy the coffee just standing up out on the deck. And I was looking out over the Puget Sound and this amazing, serene beauty of the Pacific Northwest of the US. Sipping my coffee, just admiring the view and admiring the peace and quiet of that view. And then I heard a bird cheep, 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 cheep. And it kind of got to me. It kind of, got me a little bit, how dare this cheep, cheep kind of disturb my wonderful, serene Sunday morning in the hour I've got free before I've got to do anything, right? And it kept going, chip, 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 and it would move. I noticed the sound coming from somewhere different, off to my left somewhere. And I would now, how dare this, right? It's just like nothing had changed apart from this bird that I could actually hear. And then it kind of flew quite close to me. I noticed, so I could then think, right, where is it? And I saw it. I saw a sparrow, for what a sparrow is. And I fell in love with a sparrow. I fell in love with its cheep cheep. The sparrow hadn't changed nor the sound, but I woke up. And I think that can be true for absolutely everything and everyone, as difficult as that can look. As really difficult as that can look. But I don't know if that helps, my friend.
Yeah.
You can say no, it's okay.
Well, I like your way of thinking about it and then your reflections on it. I have just been pondering a little during the last 30 minutes because I love people, but I'm in love with Simone. And so I was thinking that, again, it's just my reflections, that if love is everywhere, that the people we are in love with, we want to be in a romantic relationship with, is someone who we have aimed our focus towards, and it seems really strong with that person. There's a lot of love when we are around that person, when we're thinking about that person.
Yeah.
A little like when we're talking about creativity, if we focus it at some area of our life, we will get our ideas in that direction. Yeah.
So I know, Simone, you're on I can see you there, so just take this with a pinch of salt. I'm now going to ask Espen a question, if that's okay. Espen, do you have to try to be in love with Simone?
No.
No. Good to know. So my best answer right now, sitting here today, is that, again, this is Wyn's opinion, not true, is that it's possible for us to love everyone and everything. Because I think that may well be what we're made of. We're made of love. And then there are people that we find attractive and want to do wonderfully human things with, including cohabit, buy a house together, and forsake other people. And if that's what works for us in a romantic relationship, sounds gorgeous.
And getting a mini pig.
What do you mean?
You know, a pet pig? Yeah. You don't.
You can tell me again about that, I think.
I will send you a picture.
Okay, great. I might post it to the group as well, so we're all in the picture with that one.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, thank you, Wyn.
Thank you, Espen. Okay, so I know we've got some comments down here in the chat box. Let's see if there's a question in this. Okay, here we go. Jamie, hi, Wyn, could you talk about grounding when it comes to the principles, please? Well, I'll see what I've got. I know we're at the top of the hour, by the way, so I will not take it personally if you need to disappear, but I'm going to stay on as long as Bonnie lets me, as long as you want me to be here. Grounding is just a word that is how much we understand, to the extent that we understand what's really going on behind the scenes of the human experience, upstream of our behaviors, upstream of our feelings, to know what the cause is all the time. Now, it's a made-up word, okay? So We can get caught up in words, but what it points to is how much we understand, even when we forget. So to me is that, look, most of the time, life looks like it's coming this way towards me. Okay, most of the time it looks like my experience comes from outside. And I'm fine with that, because that in fact is what makes me appreciate a flower. What makes me appreciate, well, anything. Because if the only thing I ever had was understanding of, it was just my thinking going on, I think I might be a little bit numb. I wouldn't get excited about watching a sporting event. I'd have less of warm, fuzzy feeling when I'm with somebody I love. Now, at the same time, I might not get into the misery of missing somebody, or the misery of life sometimes looks like it sucks, because it still can now and again. It can. But while it looks like it's outside in, it doesn't mean it's true. So when I talked earlier on about my habit of feeling insecure, well, I get suspicious over that feeling now. And that's my grounding showing up. Another way the grounding shows up is that in that conversation with the Uber driver from Egypt on Saturday night, it was really clear to me what he was up against. Really clear. It's kind of obvious when I'd heard his story, what was going on for him, his understanding and misunderstanding of how life really works. And grounding is one of those things, the more that we look, gently look, as opposed to try to figure it out, because trying to figure out, of course, is using more intellectual thought than powerful thought. And insightful thought isn't the same as intellectual thought. But when we look gently at things and point our intention, as has been mentioned a few minutes ago, towards getting an understanding, then we'll see more. That's what I love about this conversation. I don't think I will stop learning about this. And I love the fact that I learn more, with every passing, maybe not every day, but every month there's something new to see or something deeper to see. And there's not going to be an end to that. To me, anyway, I don't think there will be, because I'm probably getting that much of a glimpse at what's really going on, when in fact there's an infinite amount. But that little amount has been life-changing of how life really works. Because I don't think me as a human, I can really always see all of it. You get glimpses now and again of that infinite space inside. That is just so amazing and expandful and connected, expanding, I should think is the word I was trying to say. Infinite and pure love. But to know that that's there, that can change everything. To know, even though I don't always live there in a really quiet mind, in a state of bliss, to know that that's my nature as a human being, in the same way as it's true for everyone else. Great to know. So for me, Jamie, that's how I would describe grounding and how it shows up. I'm loving the comments here. Yeah, I know, Jamie, thanks for your clarification at 7:57 p.m. That's UK time, because that's my laptop time. I think that's it for the comments, but I'm here for more questions or anything else you might want to know. So you can either type something in or say it. Marina, hello.
Wyn, hi, can you hear me?
Buenos. Yes, I can hear you.
My bandwidth is not great today, so bear with me if I disappear. I want to thank you. Deeply thank you there was something in what you said earlier, and then you said it again in a very different way. And I would like to kind of bring them together, because that is that's what is coming up for me as I hear you speak. You were talking about how this understanding can sound over spiritual, but it is actually really practical. And then when you were talking about business, you mentioned something about the need for intimacy in business. And it seems to me that you're talking about exactly the same thing. In my experience, what this understanding has done is not necessarily brought the two worlds together, but it has actually allowed me to recognize the intimate nature of businesses and any type of relationship or exchange between humans, as much as it has allowed me to recognize the spiritual in absolutely every moment and every experience we have. So it has not brought two worlds together, it has actually kind of erased completely the possibility of them being apart. And it has brought them into one.
And that's in my mind, a far nicer way of saying what I would have wished I'd have said.
Thank you, Wyn.
There's an example to that as well, is that about a year ago in July, I was with a company in India for 2 weeks. And it was my third time with that company over the previous kind of 2.5 years. A different group of people, and this group were quite senior, very senior. And at the end of the 2 weeks, the head of HR for India came in, and he wanted to hear what people got from our time together. Now, I knew that the 2 weeks went really well. It was practical and spiritual without calling it spiritual, because that's not that I kind of broached it up with them, but they wanted ways that they connect better with their clients and with their own internal parts of the organization in order to ignite growth within their company. That was the premise of why, they fly me there to do that work. So from the group of about 18 people, I think 5 of them gave their summary of our time together to the HR director at the end of that, I think Thursday afternoon. And at the end of it, the HR VP said, "Wow, it sounds like you've all been on a spiritual journey." Now, a part of my mind went, uh-oh, it's the last time I get invited back here. But of course, I knew better than that. I knew he wouldn't have mentioned that if he didn't know that was a good thing. And then immediately the HR VP says, and I couldn't be happier, because it genuinely is connecting with a client, connecting with our colleagues is completely spiritual. And I knew 12 months ago that I'd been shying away from using that word and that language and even going there. So in linking back to something that Steph asked, that's something I'm less afraid of now, of actually bringing that up. Because to Marina, to what you said, when I described it earlier as in 2 different worlds, no, it's one world. And everything that is, the logical or the cognitive part of this understanding, when you peel it back, it's completely spiritual, completely spiritual. A client I've been working with for the past 18 months as a mentee of mine, we had our last 2-day intensive together in our agreement at the end of May. And he'd been battling against the word God. For various reasons, God was one of those words that had meaning to him that he didn't really like. We got into a really deep conversation that Thursday in Kent in the southeast of the UK. And we really got into a very deep conversation of the nature of thought. And he said to me, it's weird, Wyn, but it sounds a lot like God. With a knowing twinkle in his eye that word had been really inflammatory to him every time it was mentioned. But every part of life is spiritual, and every part of life is human at the same time. And it's wonderful when people wake up to the truth and the singularity of that. And the dance between being in my head and being with eternity, God, spirit, mind, whatever word we want to have for it. It's an incredible realization that the energy that animates me, you, and everyone else, every living being, the vibration in a non-alive substance, such as the glass that's holding my water still has a vibration in its molecules at an atomic level. To know that we're made of the same stuff. Made of the same matter in its physical form. Animated by something more timeless than matter. The energy that brought everything to life is just a heck of a wonderful thing to wake up to. That's what makes, in my mind now, life a miracle, not a curse. And I can't think of anything better to do with my human existence than point people to the same thing that really made such a big impact for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wyn. That was really a wonderful conversation, and the silence that we just shared afterwards was Even better. Very delicious. Does anyone else have something, or Wyn, do you have anything else?
I don't, but if anyone else has anything.
Well, if not, I just want to thank everyone who joined us live, and
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
And let you know that the next webinar is on July 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Jen Lucas. And she's going to talk about a topic that I have not yet heard someone in the Three Principles talk about. She's going to talk about the cure for insomnia. So I think that's going to be a really fun and interesting webinar.
And Jen's a delight. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. It's been gorgeous today. Thank you very much. Keep in touch.